Hello and welcome to Devaliant Plays Blind Men by Maneater Games. This visual novel is part of Itch.io's bundle for racial justice and equality. This video contains mild language. Discretion is advised. Now, without further ado, let's get started. When I was 7, I was sent to live with my uncle. I had just lost my parents to a car accident. The same one that left the right side of my face disfigured. So disfigured. He did his best to make me feel welcome, but it wasn't enough. Bullied by my peers and ignored by people that were supposed to help me, I didn't fit in anywhere, and I spent most of my childhood thinking that I was somehow all my fault. One day, after I came home crying, my uncle pulled me aside and said to me, "People are fools, Keegan, blinded by their own stupidity. They seek to destroy what they don't understand. But people like you and me, we're different. But people like you and me, we're different. We're better. Never forget that." At that moment, it all became clear. I finally understood what I had to do. I'd follow my uncle's footsteps and I'd show them. So what do you think? I'm only missing the essay section of the application. I don't know why the League even asked for one. There's nothing particularly evil about good grammar. I laughed nervously at my own bad attempt at a joke. The League of Evil is the highest authority when it comes to criminal activity around the world. They can make or destroy a supervillain's career with a single word, and even those that don't answer to them know better than to oppose them. Membership is for life, and vacancies are rare and far in between. Even getting the opportunity to apply is difficult enough. I'm perfectly confident in my ability to deliver a flawless application, of course, but one can never be too sure. Which is exactly how I ended up asking one of my uncle's henchmen for his opinion on my application. "It's about passion. Common criminals are a dime a dozen, but being a supervillain requires true dedication." He claps his hands together in excitement. He's almost as enthusiastic as I am about the idea of me getting to join the League, which makes the fact that I have no idea what his name is rather embarrassing. It's not that I don't care. It's just that after a while, henchmen just sort of blend in together. "During training, we were shown the video of the boss's speech at the Allied Nations. It was wonderful. Half the room was in tears by the end of it." It's the one about how powerful countries abuse the voting system for the organization of legitimize their actions, isn't it? I've seen it too. It's really good. "It's not for nothing that Human Resources make all the new recruits watch it. In just a few words, you can really feel what the boss is about." "What makes him different from all the other supervillains out there?" "You don't need to worry so much. Right from the heart, and you'll do fine. Besides, you're Sphinx's nephew. It runs in the family. He said so himself, doesn't he?" I groaned. Don't even start. It's bad enough that people think I only got the opportunity because of him in the first place. The last thing I want is for it to actually be true. Getting into the League by my own merits is the only way I'll ever be taken seriously as a villain. By them and by everyone else. Not to mention, he has this weird idea about how spending all of my time down here is not good for me. And it's not something recent either. Because intelligence agencies were always looking for my uncle, and we never stayed too long in one place. As a result, I was homeschooled for most of my life. But ever since I finished my high school studies 3 years ago, he's been trying to get me enrolled in college. An actual college with other normal people. At first, it was just subtle hints and the occasional comment which I accepted as his way of showing he cared about my future. However, since last month, he's been bringing a bunch of pamphlets home. He went as far as outright telling me that if I was having a problem choosing, I should study engineering like he did. Speaking of the boss, when are you planning to tell him? I have managed to keep the application process a secret for the better part of the year, but it can't remain that way forever. As proud as it makes me that he hasn't found out yet, I'm no fool. I know that luck has played at least some part in it. Besides, I meant it when I told the henchman that my uncle is the biggest inspiration. His approval would mean a lot to me. The next time I see him, I suppose, it would be better if he hears it from me now and not from the League after I get accepted. He hates being left out, and considering that what I'm planning, he might just have a stroke. Well, here's your chance. He's heading our way. What? He was not supposed to come back until tonight. The henchman shrugs. I turned around and see my uncle walking through the door. He has never been a particularly expressive man, but he looks even more serious than usual. Good morning, boss. The henchman salutes him, and my uncle dispenses him with a nod. As he leaves, he silently mouths a good luck in my direction. Traitor. You're early. There was an explosion in the lab. There's toxic material everywhere, and since it will take the cleanup crew a few hours to get rid of it, I told everyone to go home for the day. I look down and notice his clothes are stained with some kind of black substance. Instinctively, I take a step back. He looks down as well, shakes his head, and waves his hand in a dismissive gesture. This is just oil. I was working on some of my old prototypes when I was informed of the explosion. Anything I can help with, boss? No, I want to clear up some space in the storage room. I'll get rid of whatever I can't get in working condition. And how many times do I have to tell you that you don't need to call me that? Sorry, I spent so much time with the henchman, it rubs off after a while. Among other things. Uncle, really? That was years ago, and it only happened once. As far as I know, only because he got eaten by a shark before it could happen again. Yes, the time the feeding cage malfunctioned and our perfectly trained sharks decided to have him for lunch instead. What an unfortunate coincidence. The corner of his lips quirks up in an amused smile. I barely resist the urge to roll my eyes. Have you had time to go through the pamphlets? The entrance exams begin next month, so you have to submit your papers as soon as possible. I spoke with Madame Mantis. She said that if you're interested in moving to America, she'd be happy to help you with anything you need. Ever since she retired, she has amassed quite the list of contacts on the Board of Education. In fact, if you get everything else ready before next Friday, she'll personally write you a recommendation letter. I met her a couple of times. She was a proper villain, the kind of woman that never does things out of the kindness of her heart, meaning that he either asked her for a favor or she owed him one. Either way, I bet he's only telling me this so I feel pressured into enrolling. I'm glad that you brought it up, because I've been meaning to talk to you about that. You have? Does that mean that you've chosen a college already, then? Not exactly. Not exactly. Keegan, cut to the chase. What if I didn't want to go to college? He stares at me in silence for what feels like an eternity. Finally, he closes his eyes and begins to rub his temples. We've been over this before. You need to do something with your life. You do a good job around here, but you can't keep running around with the henchmen forever. Wait, just hear me out. The reason I don't want to go to college is because I want to become a supervillain, just like you. In fact, I've already contacted the League. They think I've got a lot of potential, Uncle. They're just waiting for me to submit my full application. When did you even have time to do that? Save it. That's not important. Helping me out and being an actual supervillain are two completely different things. The League's application process is infamously hard for a reason, Keegan. Many people have died trying to impress the Council. Why do you even want to be one? Uncle, please. I've gone through the curriculum of every major college in the world, several times, actually. They've got nothing to teach me. I could go straight to a doctorate for about every field I'm interested in. Why should I waste my time with frivolities when I could be doing something that actually matters? You're the one that always says that people just don't know what's best for themselves. Well, I do. Besides, I've been helping you out practically my whole life. I'm not making an uninformed decision. I know exactly what I'm getting myself into. Are you sure about this? I've never been more sure about anything. Have you decided what you are going to call yourself? Do you have a base of operations? What about a plan? How are you going to pay for everything? Do you remember the weapons dealer that sold you parts that you were missing for the death ray? Turns out he also handles mercenary contracts, and he comes highly recommended in that regard. He said that he would lend me one of his bases and some people if I went over a couple of blueprints his scientists are working on. I know it's not ideal, but it would only be for a day or two. After I'm accepted in the League, I'll have enough resources to get my own. He crosses his arms and there's another moment of silence. If you are serious about this, I won't be the one to stop you, but you are going to do this properly. Call the weapons dealer and tell him that you won't be needing his services anymore. You'll use my lair and my men. We'll draft a contract, and if anybody asks, you rented them. Thank you, Uncle. I promise I won't disappoint you. Of course you won't. Now, come. Tell me more about your plan. A month later, location National Museum of Science, Bonn, Germany. I pretend to adjust a strand of hair behind my ear, pressing the button in my earpiece to increase the volume. Boss, I'm in the control room. I've taken care of the security recordings. The police won't find anything of use in any of them. The men are all in their post and ready to go too. They'll be waiting for your signal. I'll stay here for a little longer to keep an eye on things. Please let me know if you understood. I nod. Alright, see you in the auditorium, boss. As an aspiring supervillain, particularly one hoping to join the League, there are two things to be taken into account when it comes to carrying out plans: visibility and chance of success. Just like there's no point in doing something so uninspired that it barely makes it to the local news, there's no point in getting arrested on national television. Finding balance is key, and that's exactly why I've chosen Bonn's National Museum of Science as my target. It's a beautiful place, and just like its research center hosts many important scientists, its vault is home to a lot of rare and expensive equipment. Despite that, under normal circumstances, there wouldn't be anything particularly worth stealing here. But starting today, the museum will be hosting the Schultz-Hult collection of rare minerals, its main piece being the famous Ingolausch diamond. Besides being one of the largest cut precious stones known to man, its purity and chemical composition make it one of the most versatile energy conductors in the world. In addition to the exhibit itself, the museum board has also invited Professor Schultz to give a conference at the end of the inauguration party. Schultz is both a geologist and a political activist, and he's greatly respected in both fields. To make sure that no other villain interferes, I told both the League and my uncle that I'd be planting bombs in the museum and holding the guests hostage for a ransom. Very few people are willing to risk getting blown up by a first-timer, after all. But actually, my real plan is to steal the diamond, to kidnap Professor Schultz. This looks like a job for a dice roll. Where did I hide my dice app? There we go. Alright, so we're going to roll a d20. Odds, it's to steal the diamond. Evens, to kidnap Professor Schultz. I have a feeling that Professor Schultz is hot, and he's probably a love interest, so... 6! Evens. We're going to kidnap a hot professor. As a public figure involved in politics, Schultz's disappearance will be all the news will be talking about for as long as he's missing. Kidnappings are hardly my area of expertise, but all things considered, they are pretty straightforward. And it's not like I will have to deal with him for long afterwards in any case. I'm certain that both the Americans and the Russians will be willing to pay a hefty sum to get their hands on him. If I had to guess, I'd say that they'll want to claim they were the ones that saved him, making the other side look incompetent. That's not hard. Or maybe they'll use the opportunity to get rid of him while the blame falls on someone else. It's a great plan, if I say so myself, if nerves don't kill me first, that is. Until Schultz's conference began, there isn't much for me to do except wait. The only reason I got here at the beginning of the inauguration in the first place was in case the henchmen needed me for something. Unfortunately, that also means I've had plenty of time to go over the plan in my head, including all the little details that could go wrong. I hate to admit it, but my uncle was right. Being the mastermind of a plan instead of just another person helping out is a completely different experience. But it doesn't matter. When I join the League, I'll get to tell the story whichever way I want. None of the boring parts, none of the doubt. Everything was perfect on the first try. In the end, I decided to go grab a drink at the bar while I wait. The bar is actually more of a counter in one of the corners of the lobby than its own separate place. It's meant for people who want to get something to drink without having to find a place at one of the tables or wait for the servers to take their order. As I approach, the first thing I see is a man surrounded by a small group of people, most of them women. I can't get a good look at him from over here, but every once in a while the whole group erupts in laughter. After the third or so time that it happens, the bartender walks over from behind the counter and says something to them. He probably asked them to either lower their volume or leave, since the group began to disperse right afterwards. Now, by himself, the man takes a seat next to another blonde man. He leans back on the chair and begins swinging it back and forth. Weird. That's how he sits. Do I have to click? Yeah, I have to click. Okay. So that's like Germany from Hetalia with a scar on his face and a fur collar. Okay, I get what he's doing now. He's tilting a stool back and forth. That's what they meant. No wonder he was surrounded by women. He's pretty handsome, and the man next to him isn't too bad himself either. Definitely a much better view than what I had at the lobby. A moment passes and the man in the tuxedo says something. They exchanged a few words, but the expression on the blonde man's face was so unfriendly that they don't really go beyond that. If looks could kill. In any case, I don't have much time to think about it. At that exact moment, the first man turns around and our eyes meet. I look away to see if he'll do the same, but he doesn't. Instead, I can feel him staring at me until I give up and look back. He makes a gesture at the bartender to order another whatever he's having. Now, with the additional glass in hand, he approaches, stopping right next to me and leaning against the counter. Having fun? From his body language and his accent, I'd say he's American. I wave my hand in a dismissing manner. Not really. Watching the governor try to explain the merits of mineralogy has been the highlight of my evening so far. These things are usually more lively. Well, as lively as events of the sort can get. Last time there was this professor from Columbia. What was his name? Anyway, he's convinced that Schultz's methodology is faulty, so he's always ends up causing a ruckus whenever they meet. But this time, the committee made sure that the guest list is as inoffensive as possible. You didn't hear it from me, of course. Of course. Drink? He raises the glass towards me. I saw him order it, but I didn't see the bartender pour it, so of course I'm not going to accept it. I shake my head and pick up my own glass, but almost empty by now, from the counter. No, thank you. I already had one. He shrugs and takes a sip. It's quite good, isn't it? German alcohol is one of the two reasons I'm glad the Soviets only got to keep half of the country. And the other one is Germans. By now, it's become clear that he's flirting with me. Whether he's actually doing a good job is a different point altogether. I decide to... Let's see. What do the dice say? Same thing. Odds flirt back. Evens try to get rid of him. Ooh, the dice do not like him. I don't have time for loud drunkards, as handsome as they may be. He laughs, puts down one of the glasses, and offers me his free hand. I resist the urge to roll my eyes and instead offer him a tight-lipped smile. The handshake lasts a couple of seconds more than strictly necessary, and instead of simply letting go at the end, he slides his fingers across my palm. I raise an eyebrow, but I don't say anything. He's not even being subtle about the way he's ogling me. Johns, it's a pleasure to meet you. Likewise. Don't take this the wrong way, but you look like kind of a young for an academic. I'm still an undergrad. I'm hoping for a chance to discuss my thesis with Schultz before I submit it. Asking Schultz for his opinion? That's quite a high bar you've set for yourself. What's your thesis about? It's kind of complicated. I'm a smart man. Go ahead, try me. God, why won't he just leave? In simple terms, I'm researching ways to improve the accuracy of the tools used to locate the Harvest petroleum deposits. It would make extraction quicker, cheaper, and more environmentally friendly. That's very impressive. Even more so for an undergrad. With a grin, he puts a hand on my shoulder and leans closer to me until his face is practically touching mine. His breath feels hot against my ear, and mixed with the faint smell of alcohol coming from him, it's enough to give me goosebumps. Not the good kind, unfortunately. I take a step back to put some distance between us, hoping to throw him off balance. But instead of letting go or falling, he takes a step forward without so much as missing a beat. We actually end up closer than we were before. Maybe we could discuss some of your ideas in private? Are you like this with all the geologists you meet? Only with the ones that look like they could use a distraction. Should I take that as a yes? Maybe some other time. If I miss Schultz, my thesis supervisor will have my head. Some other time, then. He picks up the glass, chugs down the rest of the drink, and gives my arm a squeeze before turning around and walking away. As soon as he's out of my sight, I let out a groan. What a piece of work, trying to pick up people in a place like this. No wonder he got told to get lost by the man at the bar. What did he even expect me to do? He was lucky it was me. Anyone else would have punched him for his trouble. There's a buzzing sound from one of the nearby speakers, and I turn my attention to it. First call. Please proceed to your seats. The conference will begin in 15 minutes. Then the announcement is done. I head towards the auditorium. Other than the first two rows, which have been reserved for the politicians and the press, the seats aren't numbered. Terribly inconvenient for people that would rather secure a good place without having to enter early or wait too long in a line for it. On the other hand, it's perfect for someone like me that would rather not have a name attached to their tickets. When one of the ushers takes my ticket, I recognize him as one of my uncle's men, just like the henchman said. He directs me toward a free seat at the corner of one of the middle rows. Perfect. Nothing would ruin a dramatic entrance like having to ask people to stand up so I can get onto the stage. Once I'm at the seat, it quickly becomes obvious why no one had taken it yet. Sitting next to me is the blonde man from the hall, reading the program with an expression on his face just as unfriendly as the one he had back there. Excuse me, is the seat taken? He looks at me, shakes his head, and goes back to reading without a single word. His scar swapped places. Oops. Under any circumstances, I wouldn't care, but come on. He talked to the other man at the bar, and I don't get more than a side glance. It's entirely possible for him to just be some regular guy with a bad social skills and a poor German. But he didn't even attempt to answer in English either. I decided to give him my gut feeling and try, and leaning closer to him and lowering my voice so that no one else will hear, I began to speak to him in Russian. I've heard that Russians have a lot of trouble getting travel permits nowadays, even those who have never been to the Soviet Union. I can't even imagine how hard it must be for actual Soviets to get out of their own country. That gets his attention, enough to put down the program and turn to face me. He looks like he's assessing me and trying to intimidate me at the same time. If I'm completely honest with myself, why am I interested in talking with him? Because he insists on ignoring me. This looks like it's going to be a lot of D20 rolls. 2, because there's something suspicious about him. It's not uncommon to find Russian expatriates in high-profile events, but in general, they're pretty easy to recognize. This man isn't one. I went through a lot of trouble to make sure no one would interrupt me today, so if there's something out of place about him, I need to know. Me neither. But I imagine it's just about as difficult as finding someone who will teach you Russian on this side of the world. His accent is very thick, even in Russian. Thankfully, I speak the language fairly well, otherwise I would have regretted my decision as soon as he opened his mouth. As with all things, it's a matter of knowing the right people. Speaking a language won't get you arrested, though. That depends on how you use it. And how do you use it? Who are you? No one of consequence, as long as you don't get in my way. We exchange a look of suspicion before he goes back to reading, not without hesitation. Seems like I'll have to keep an eye on him. Third call, please remain in silence for the duration of the conference. We'd like to remind you that photography is restricted to authorized press. The lights of the room begin to dim until they turn off completely, and the auditorium's only remaining illumination are the spotlights above the stage. A man in a suit appears from the left end of the stage, followed by Professor Schultz. He stops at the podium, and soon any hopes of conversation are drowned out by the audience's applause. Please welcome Professor Hans Schultz, head of the Schultz Foundation. There's another round of applause, this time much louder. After a couple of seconds pass, Schultz holds his hand up, and the whole room goes quiet. Slowly, the floor next to him begins to open, and everyone watches in awe as the case in which the diamond is kept raises from it. I had seen pictures of it before, of course, but it doesn't compare to seeing it in person. As you all know, the Inga Lodge is amongst the rarest gemstones in the world. Flawless both in its surface and its interior, it allows both heat and electricity to be conducted with minimal dispersion up to... I pressed the button on the side of my watch. I couldn't risk bringing too much equipment on my person, but I managed to fit both a communicator and a small laser into my watch. At my signal, the doors burst open and the henchmen appear, while the ones that had been posing as ushers hurry to lock the doors behind them. My uncle only ended up lending me about half a dozen of them, but since the people inside have no way to tell, they are more than enough. There are whispers of confusion at first, but the room goes completely quiet when Schultz slams his hand against the podium. What is the meaning of this? Security! Get these people out of here! I stand up, and I'm escorted to the stage by that one henchman whose name I should probably know by now. While we walk, he goes ahead and hands me the controller for the bombs. It's mostly for show, since we only wired enough bombs to mess up some of the less important rooms slightly, while the rest are decoys set to release smoke. Of course, they don't know that. There has been a slight change of plans, Professor. As I take the podium, I put down the control in front of me, and I signal the henchman to restrain Schultz. They both get off the stage, and he leads the professor toward the side of the auditorium. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. If you cooperate and do exactly as you are told, no one will get hurt. When you look back to this moment in a few years, you'll realize that it was the most important day of your lives. Scientific achievements, political careers, everything you've done will pale in comparison to this instance. And that is because today you become part of history. You'll have the honor of witnessing the birth of one of the greatest supervillains known to man, Dr. Cyclops. As of right now, you'll also have the honor of being my hostages. Hopefully the government values your lives. I'm briefly interrupted by the sound of talking coming from amongst the seats. I decide to ignore it and continue. Enough to pay the... When it happens again, I stop speaking and begin to look over the crowd, searching for the source of the interruption. Most of the guests have either a look of fear or discomfort on their faces, and some of them even shake their heads when they notice me looking at them. What do I have henchmen for if they can't even keep people from talking at the same time as me? Finally, I notice that the henchman is out of place, standing at the end of the row rather than at his place next to Schultz. He seems to be arguing with someone. I step down from the stage to get a better look, and I recognize the other person as the man from the lobby. What are you doing? Sit down. I'm going to the bathroom, unless you want me to get sick all over the floor. He stands up and takes a few steps forward. Actually, it's more of an awkward stumbling. He looks really drunk. Hey, I said you aren't going anywhere. The henchman grabs his arm to stop him. Suddenly the man turns around and punches him square in the nose, knocking him out cold in the process. Stepping around the henchman's unconscious body, he puts a hand inside his jacket and takes out a gun. At first, I'm amused by the idea of getting shot over an overeager drunk, but he manages to point it right at me just fine. Agent Hunter, Global. You're all under arrest. Shit. People begin to turn to look at him, whispering to each other until the crowd's attention is divided between the two of us. Meanwhile, none of the henchmen move, unsure of what to do. The only security on site was supposed to be the museum's guards, and some of the local police stationed outside. There was nothing to make us think that an agent of Global would be here, let alone armed. The henchmen could deal with him through sheer numbers alone, but I need them to keep control of the crowd. If everyone begins to panic, it's not going to be a good day for any of us. I decide to try and bluff, so I shrug and laugh it off. Nice try, but you wouldn't risk a shootout in a room full of civilians, or for me to blow this place sky high. I pick up the control and put my index finger on the big red button in the middle of it. See this? My men have put bombs all around the museum. One false move and I'll push it. With you still inside? Nah, I don't think so. As for your henchmen, my aim is pretty good. And something tells me none of them want to be the one that gets their boss shot. Guess we'll have to see who's faster. Get him! The henchmen are getting ready to fire when I'm blinded by a flash of white light. Out of instinct, I drop the control and raise my arm to cover my good eye, but the movement makes me lose my balance and I end up falling back. Grenade! Everybody get down! Hold your fire! My vision is blurry, so much that I barely see the second flash of light when it goes off. I hear the people begin to scream, but the noise sounds distant, as if I was in another room altogether. It's not much of a relief, but at least that means that they were flash grenades rather than fragmentation ones. It takes a couple of seconds for my eyesight to come back completely, and a couple more for me to regain enough strength to be able to stand up. I look around. Half of the henchmen are on the floor covering their eyes in pain, and the other half still looks too confused to do anything. Upon realizing that no one is blocking their way anymore, the people in the seats begin to run towards the exits in panic, pushing each other and screaming. By the time the henchmen try to regain control of the situation, the whole room has descended into chaos. In front of me, Agent Hunter points his gun in my direction, and begins to approach, or at least he's trying to. His hand is shaking so much that it's obvious that he's just as disoriented as I am. I frown. If it wasn't him, then who? He looks at me, then at the floor, and stops. I look down and, and realize why. It's the control. He hurls himself forward and grabs it. I take the opportunity to kick the gun out of his other hand, but he holds onto my leg and pulls me down with him. We both end up on the floor, trying to wrestle the control out of each other's hands. While Agent Hunter may be stronger, right now I'm the one in better condition, so I manage to hold my own against him. We keep rolling around on the floor until I manage to flip him over and pin him down. Has anyone ever told you that this is your best angle? Shut up and give it back. As we continue to struggle for the control, I notice someone get on the stage out of the corner of my eye. I turn my head and see the blonde man from the lobby walk up to the diamond's case and lift it up. It's a brief distraction, but it's enough to give Hunter an upper hand, and he needs to push me off. When I fall back, the control is sent flying into the air, and Hunter and I stare at it as it lands right on the detonator. Well, shit. Of course, nothing happens. It's a decoy, isn't it? Hunter shakes his head in disbelief, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. But instead of looking angry, he seems rather amused by the whole situation. Having decided that his immediate business with me is done, he runs past me and onto the stage to catch up with the other man. They begin fighting over the diamond right away, trying to keep the other from getting a proper hold on it. They're pretty evenly matched at first, but the longer the fight lasts, the more Hunter struggles to keep up. Whoever the Russian is, it's clear that he's not from just a random guest or some opportunistic thief. It will be an easy mission, they said. No one cares about that old rock anymore, they said. What does the KGB even want with it? Don't you commies dislike everything that may be worth more than a ruble? Be quiet. The diamond is the property of the Soviet government. We come to take it back. I am sorry for my Russian accent. I am well out of practice. Global and the KGB? I knew there was something odd about those two. Good thing that I'm not here for the diamond. Let them fight over it while we get away with Schultz. I walk over to where the henchman is and I nudge him awake with my foot. He stands up holding the side of his head with a pained expression. His nose is bleeding from Hunter's punch, and he has a split lip. He's pretty lucky that he didn't get trampled by people on their way out. Pull yourself together. We need to get Schultz and get out of here before the agents notice. Can you help me get him to the vehicle? Yeah. Go tell the others to get out and get everything ready. I'll hold Schultz back in the meantime. He nods and goes running to where the other henchmen are. They still look confused from the grenade, but they are in well enough shape to pick up their guns and head to the exit. Speaking of Schultz, where is he? The professor didn't leave with the rest of the people. Instead, he's been watching both men fight over the diamond. He obviously cares more about it than for his own safety. He's even too distracted to notice us as I approach from behind. Professor, if you would be so kind as to come with me. Schultz turns around, alarmed. I'm about to grab him when there's a loud noise right outside the auditorium. I feel the floor move, and I lose my step. The room quickly begins to fill with smoke and dust, and I cover my mouth and nose with my sleeve. What the hell? That sounded like a bomb. But how? Never mind. I'll figure that out later. Right now, Schultz is more important. The smoke gets thicker by the second, and this soon becomes impossible to distinguish anything more than a couple of meters away. I have just enough visibility to see two blurry figures through the smoke, each running towards the exit through different rows. One of them must be Schultz. The only people left here besides me and the henchman are the professor and both agents, whom I'm pretty sure are still on the stage. Damn it. It's too dark. I can't see their faces. Boss, where are you? Over here. Between the two of us, it should be enough to incapacitate Schultz and carry him outside. Once there are others, the others will take care of the rest. I start to run toward... Okay. Pretty sure those are both agents, so let's see. 8, the man in the green suit. Pretty sure that's the Russian agent. I run toward the man in the green suit and tackle him with all my strength. He's a lot sturdier than I would have imagined, and I almost dislocate my shoulder from the impact alone. While I keep him on the floor, the henchman puts a hood over his head and ties his hands and feet. Even between the two of us, it takes a lot of effort to get him out of the building. He struggles so much that he actually kicks the henchman right in the nose at one point. This poor guy is just getting hit in the nose. Again? Yeah, sorry, man. What do they feed these people? I get him into the trunk of the vehicle and head back to the base. While the henchman drives, I change out of the suit and onto my usual clothes. Every once in a while, we hear the professor kick the trunk from the inside, as if trying to get out. It makes what's already a tense trip even more tense. Finally, after a couple of hours, we get to the lair. Stretch break. A couple of henchmen help us get Schultz out of the trunk and into the laboratory. I had planned to simply sit him on a chair and put a guard at the door to keep an eye on him, but he gave us too much trouble on the way here for that. With how the day has gone so far, I don't want to risk him getting shot trying to escape. Do we still have that table with the straps? The one we used before we had the cell block? Yeah. Bring it over and tie down Schultz. The less he can move, the better. He nods just as he's about to leave. He touches his nose, and he stops to gesture at the two other henchmen to go with him. They return a couple of minutes later, carrying the table with them. That thing is probably older than I am, and proof that half of the things at the warehouse are there for purely nostalgic reasons. The henchmen put the table down in the middle of the laboratory and secure it to the floor. While two of them cut the ropes around Schultz's hand and feet and lift him onto the table, the other straps him down to it. Schultz thrashes and kicks until the very last moment, shouting curses at us. At least I think that's what he's doing. The hood muffles a lot of it, so it just sounds like a distant yelling and heavy breathing. Well, despite all the setbacks, we did it. Congratulations, everyone. The henchmen nod and give me half-hearted smiles that make me look more relieved than happy. They probably thought I was going to blame them for what happened at the museum. Which, to be honest, I would have done if we had come back empty-handed. I still need to figure out how we missed 2 agents. Someone in intelligence is going to have to answer for that. But that's a matter for another time. Now, I get closer to the table, leaning over so that I'm right in front of the professor. At my signal, the henchman standing closest to Schultz grabs the hood covering his head and takes it off, and revealing the Russian agent. You have given us a lot of trouble, Professor Russia. Schultz? Yep. I mean, I don't know how this wasn't like a dead giveaway that this wasn't Schultz. This isn't a table, it's a chair. But just as his face becomes visible, the whole room freezes. The man on the table is not Schultz. It's the Russian. You. The henchmen exchange a nervous look between them for about a second before turning to stare at me. I try to clear my throat in an authoritative manner, but it sounds more like I'm trying not to choke. Keep an eye on him. Don't let him move a muscle until I come back. I take a couple of steps back, and as soon as I am sure that nobody can see me anymore, I run out of the laboratory. When he agreed to lend me the lair, my uncle did so with the condition that he'd spend the day working in his office. Close enough to keep an eye on me, but out of sight as to be fastidious about it. At the time, I wasn't too happy about it, but now I couldn't be more glad that he was so insistent. When I get there, I don't even bother knocking. Knowing the door will be unlocked, I simply storm inside. Uncle! But instead of my uncle, I find Madame Mantis sitting behind his desk. As soon as she sees me, she stands up, walking over until she's close enough to put a hand on my shoulder. My first instinct is to try to compose myself and pretend there's nothing wrong, so I force myself to smile. Madame Mantis, to what do I owe the pleasure? I heard that you wanted to apply to the League, and I came to make sure that Sphinx wasn't giving you too much trouble. I know he can be difficult. When he said that you'd give me a letter for college, I thought that maybe you also... I am, but only because it's always good to have more options. Your uncle and I hardly agree on this. Anyway, he saw what happened at the museum on the news and decided to do some investigating on his own. He asked me to stay here, just in case. He should be back in a couple of hours. Hours? This just keeps getting worse. Your uncle is very worried about you. You're lucky he's already bald. Mantis pats me on the shoulder before moving her arm away. She then circles me a couple of times before walking all the way to the door and locking it. Now, why are you really here for? I just wanted to let him know that I was back already, and that I'm safe. You can't hide things from me, dear. Very few people can. You came running in, and you look like you just saw a ghost. If you let me help, we can figure something out before he comes back. I take a deep breath while I consider my options. The last thing I want is more people knowing about what happened than it's necessary. But Mantis would gain nothing out of telling people I messed up. Besides, she gets along reasonably well with my uncle. There's a good chance that she really just means to help me. She's right. If I fix this before my uncle comes back and I can pretend it never happened, he doesn't have to find out at all. Things at the museum didn't exactly go as planned. To keep it short, I decided to bring back a hostage. But I wanted to bring back one of the speakers, Professor Schultz. But the place was too dark, and with all the confusion, we ended up capturing a Soviet agent that was there instead of him. Now he's down in the lab, and I don't know what to do. I'm not going to tell you how badly you messed up, because I have the feeling that you're perfectly aware. First of all, take another deep breath. You can't appear nervous when talking to a hostage. Does it look like he could have some kind of important information? I guess. I mean, at the very least, he should know why the Soviets wanted the diamond. He said it's because it used to belong to them, but I'm not sure about that. The timing is very strange. They could have come for it at any other time. Do you think I could ask the KGB for a ransom? Or hand him over to the League? No. I doubt he's important enough for the KGB to pay for him, and he won't be much use to the League if that's all he knows. Soviet agents operate on what's basically a need-to-know basis. KGB's policy regarding captured agents is to always assume they have been compromised. Ugh, great. He's useless then. Not exactly. I know a couple of people that still do work for the Soviet territory from time to time. Any information about why an agent was at the museum would be of interest to them. They have some leverage in the League, and they are the type that doesn't like owing favors to others. If you make sure that no one finds out it was an accident, you can still make this look good enough for your application. Get him to talk. Make all of this seem intentional. Yes, I can do that. Thank you, Mantis. I'm about to turn around and leave when she moves in front of me and takes my hand in hers. Don't forget, Keegan. You're in charge here. She squeezes a little harder, enough to make my fingers hurt. Besides, if it comes down to it, you can always kill him and dispose of the body. I'm sure that won't be necessary, Mantis. Of course not. She laughs, letting me go before heading to unlock the door. I'm not sure if I'd go as far as to say I feel confident, but now I realize that I deal with far more intimidating people on a daily basis, and I do it pretty well. If I don't let them throw me around, some Soviet agent isn't going to be the one to ruin my plans. The first thing that I notice when I enter the laboratory is that all the henchmen are gone, except for the one that helped me bring the Russian here in the first place. In their place, there are a couple of armed guards on each side of the table. The change did the opposite of easing the tension in the room, and both guards look slightly uncomfortable as they acknowledge me with a nod. I wave my hand, and they both step aside and make room for me. I clear my throat to get the attention of the agent. He raises his head, and the look he gives me is enough to send a shiver down my spine. It's like he's considering all the ways he could kill me. This explains why the henchmen left and brought in the guards. I remember what Mantis said to me as I straighten my back and I return, hit the stare. It soon becomes a staring contest, neither of us wanting to be the first one to look away. Finally, it's me that gets unnerved, and I cough to dissimulate. I suppose it isn't hard for you to get out of your country, after all, being an agent and everything. But since you're here already, let's see what use we can find for you, shall we? Here's the deal. I need information, and you have it. If you answer my questions, I promise I'll let you go. I won't talk. Don't be stubborn. I'll have it one way or another. But you do get a say about how difficult this will be for you. This time he doesn't even bother answering. Yeah, I'm just rolling for all the choices. Also, my throat is really dry. 20! Try to appeal to him. With true serum, the risk of accidentally poisoning him is too high for my liking. Likewise, if I decide to torture the information out of him, there's a chance that he'll resist too much and he'll end up dying from his wounds. Besides, I'm not really a fan of blood. Same. Even just thinking about it makes my stomach turn. It will be much easier for everyone involved if he just decides to cooperate. Suit yourself, but I know what the KGB does to the people that fail them. And even if you don't talk, just by letting yourself be captured, you've already failed. You'll know nothing. Don't I? Think about it. This is the perfect chance to start over, a new beginning away from everything. No one will know what happened to you except for me, and frankly, I couldn't care less. You just need to answer some questions and you'll be free. There's no need to die for your country. He hesitates for a moment before shaking his head. There always is. Don't you have any family? Anyone you care about? You could help them this way too. Send them things, get them out of the Soviet Union. I have a sister. She was sent away for chess tournament and she never returned. I always wondered. I'm not surprised by the sudden confession, since that was exactly what I had hoped for. But by how he sounds when he says it, he even looks vulnerable for a second. But it doesn't matter. She was good as dead the moment she left. I realized right then that perhaps I didn't think this out as thoroughly as I should have, because I suddenly feel less like pressing him and for more information. He was set on not saying a word when I was only talking about his job, but as soon as his family came up, his attitude changed completely. If there's something I can sympathize with, it's losing family. I'll find out what happened to her for you. Then you can decide whether you'd like to speak after all. And I'm just supposed to believe you? No, of course not. But if you live, you can go see for yourself whether it's the truth. You'll get water, something to eat. I'll give them orders to not mistreat you, but they'll make sure you don't escape. So don't try anything stupid. He tries to dissimulate, but I can tell from the look on his face that the henchman is really wishing for Sergei to give him an excuse to hurt him. When did we learn Sergei's name? Did I miss that? On my way out, I glare at him to make sure he doesn't get any funny ideas. I cursed the moment of weakness all the way to the office. I was supposed to do one thing, get him to talk, and somehow I ended up promising something that I'm not even sure I can do. For one, I'm not sure that we have such information in hand, and even if we do, I'm not sure I can access it. I almost forgot about Madame Mantis. She's probably still inside. Ugh. If I begin to go through the files with her there, she's going to want to know what I want the information for. Her advice immediately comes to mind, and it sends a shiver down my spine. While I try to think of a way to get her out of the office or somewhere else, I see one of the henchmen passing by. It's just some random guy from maintenance, which makes him perfect for what I have in mind. Hey, you! He looks around and points at himself, as if making sure that I'm talking to him and not someone else. I gesture at him and to come closer. Yes, you. Are you busy? He shakes his head. Do me a favor. Head to the lower level and call Madame Mantis. I don't care what you call her for. Just make sure she's busy for as long as possible. Luckily for me, most of the base's personnel doesn't deal directly with her very often. So as far as they're concerned, we're about as equally intimidating. And I have the advantage of being related to the boss. The henchman turns around, hurriedly heading toward the nearest elevator. About a minute passes until I see Mantis come out of the office, looking annoyed as she walks down the hall. As soon as I am certain that she is gone, I go look inside and lock the door behind me. I spend the better part of an hour staring at the monitor as I go through the files. Finding one that isn't classified is hard enough already. Finding one that doesn't require me to mess with my uncle's computer more than necessary is even more so. What's the deal with this man? I've seen world leaders whose files are less protected than this. Anything remotely related to him is classified 10 times over. Finally, I find one that looks promising enough. It's a list of notable people that defected, compiled for the purpose of letting supervillains know of people that might be willing to work for them. Because it has hundreds of names and most of them aren't actually important, it must have slipped through the cracks. I keep scrolling until I find someone that matches Sergei's description, who I'm pretty sure is his sister. There aren't any female chess players that left the scene after an important match, after all. Ah, she moved to America under a new identity. That makes sense. From the looks of it, she retired from chess and has been living a quiet life since then. In the end, I don't find much information beyond that, but at least it's better than nothing. While I go over the files once more to make sure that they're just as I found them, I pick up the phone and call the lab. When the henchman answers, I hear the guards arguing with each other in the background. It's not a good sign. I've got what I need. I'll be down in a minute. Go tell the guards to ready the vehicle and deliver Sergei to the garage when it's done. I want him tied up and blindfolded. We'll drop him at the nearest city. The henchman takes too long to answer, and since I just know that's a sign that he's about to protest in some way, I continue talking. The sooner he's out of here, the sooner this is over with. Maybe we'll even look like we know what we're doing if there's... Wow. Maybe it will even look like we know what we're doing if there isn't an angry Russian in the middle of the laboratory by tomorrow morning. He doesn't sound too convinced as he hangs up, but I honestly couldn't care less about his opinion at this point. When I get back to the lab, I expect to see the henchman escorting Sergei outside, maybe with the help of a couple of guards. Those were my instructions, after all. Instead, I find just two of them, standing in the middle of the room. Sergei has a red cloth covering his mouth, and his hands are handcuffed behind his back. The henchman is struggling to push him toward one of the back doors, but they aren't heading toward an exit. That door in particular leads to the aquarium, where my uncle keeps his sharks and other dangerous aquatic life forms when they're not in use. What are you doing? I told you to get him out of here. The henchman turns around, and for a moment he has a look of annoyance on his face, but it quickly changes to something more apologetic as he realizes who he's talking to. Boss, I don't care what you thought. Do I have to do everything myself? Move aside, I'm escorting him on my own. He doesn't move, so I end up pushing him out of the way and grabbing the back of Sergei's coat. Given how much taller he is, I have to stretch my arm upwards to get a proper grip. If I wasn't so angry, I'd feel rather ridiculous. But instead of staying out of the way, the henchman moves ahead of us and pushes the button that locks the door. What do you think you're doing? Something I tried very hard to avoid. You just couldn't kill him, could you? You had to go and make everything more difficult. Now I have to kill you both. Put your hands on your head and stand next to Sergei. I stand still for a moment, trying to make sense of the situation. But before I can say or do anything, I see him put a hand inside his shirt and take out a gun. He's pointing it at us, his finger resting on the trigger. I let Sergei go and take a step back. Suddenly he breaks his handcuffs and with his hands now free, rips the cloth covering his mouth. The henchman hesitates, and that second is all Sergei needs to grab him in a chokehold, pulling him away from the door while trying to get him to drop the gun. Quick, open the door. I get to the keypad, but nothing I do unlocks the door. I can't activate the alarm either, as the only thing I get when I try is an error message. He overrode my codes. Sergei isn't any more successful than the henchman elbows him so hard he knocks him backwards, and he has to take a moment to catch his breath. Since I can't do anything about the door, I begin going through the drawers, desperately trying to find something useful. All I manage to find is a small handgun, so it will have to do. Unfortunately, I'm not a good shot, and between my nerves and lack of practice, I don't even come close to hitting the henchman when I fire. It's enough to startle him, however, and Sergei used the opportunity to run towards me. He pushes the table on its side, and we both duck behind it, using it as cover. Almost immediately, he snatches the gun away from my hand. Hey! The one who can actually shoot a target at point-blank range gets the gun, especially because we only have 5 bullets left. Don't move. He leans to the side slightly, just enough to get his hand and part of his head from behind the table. Fuck, I can't see him anymore. You two know each other, don't you? He looks at me for about a second before he turns around and goes back to keeping an eye on the laboratory. I'm pretty sure that he's not going to answer me, but then he sighs. His name is Yakov. We used to work together before he defected. I had heard the rumors, but I didn't think he'd actually become a mercenary. He's a shame for one more than just the KGB. He's a shame for the whole Soviet Union. I didn't recognize him at first, but when he spoke to me, I realized that it was him. A mercenary? That's impossible. He's been here for months. I conducted all the interviews around the time he was hired myself. I'd have noticed if there was anything suspicious. Sergei gives me a skeptical look. Admittedly, being shot by someone I hired is not the ideal situation to argue about my ability to judge people. He said his original contract was for someone called Sphinx. He hesitates a little before saying the name, as if he was trying to recall exactly where he had heard it before. Uncle! I don't find out whether he remembers because it's me who messes up. I bite my tongue, but it's too late. In the heat of the moment, I let it slip that we're related. He came here for your uncle? Do you really want to talk about that right now? Yes. He's interrupted by the sound of an alarm as the white light of the laboratory lamps is replaced by an intermittent red flash. What's that? Shit. That's why he didn't shoot us when we ran to hide. It's an evacuation alarm. And it can be activated from any room? Is it just for evacuation? By anyone with a code, yes. It wouldn't be much of an alarm otherwise, would it? But more importantly, once activated, it purges everything inside the base. It's basically a self-destruction sequence. How long do we have? About 20 minutes, give or take. It depends on how much data the computer has to erase beforehand. Think. He overrode my code, but my uncle's can't be, because it's also the master password. There's nothing I can do about the alarm, but I can use another code to open the door. Then we can get out. Good. Stand up then. What? If he doesn't shoot, he's gone. If he shoots, I can see where he's doing it from and shoot back. Except he has to shoot me for that. Sergei glares at me, and I get the impression that if I don't stand up on my own, he's just going to throw me aside anyway. So I do it. Mere seconds later, a bullet grazes my arm from behind one of my uncle's machines. Sergei notices it too, and quickly shoots twice in succession. The first one hits the henchman in the arm, making him drop his gun. The second goes straight through his leg, making him fall to the ground. Sergei runs toward him and kicks the gun as far as he can, then uses his free hand to forcibly drag the henchman from behind the machine. I take a second to check my arm. It hurts like hell, but it's not too bad. Nothing that will cause permanent damage, at least. Deciding that it's as safe as it's going to get, I go to the keypad and begin to work on unlocking the door. Just like I thought, the henchman had no way of disabling my uncle's codes, so it's a matter of trying them all until I find one that works and the door opens. Done. Let's get out of here. What do you want to do with him? I take a look at the henchman who's pressing his hand against his wound to slow down the bleeding. If it were for me, I'd just leave him here. But something tells me that my uncle is going to want to have a word or two with him once he finds out all about this. Right. I suppose we should take him with us? You're lucky it wasn't the Sphinx who had to go through this. Who says he wasn't? You haven't seen him since you arrived, have you? Mantis did. Are you sure? Make a pause while I think. Actually, no. She said that he had gone to take care of some business before I arrived, not that she had seen him. We both know that the hangar is all the way over on the other side of the base. We both know that... Sorry, his voice changed. We both know that the hangar is all the way over on the other side of the base. You won't make it in time if you decide to take me with you. Since thanks to Sergei, I can't walk on my own. So you can either go looking for him, or you can make sure that we all get out of here together. But you can't do both. I could leave you with Sergei. He looks just about as upset as I feel. Sure, I leave the two Soviets together. What could go wrong? This is hard. I kind of want to go check on my uncle. Okay, we're going to check on my uncle, because that's what my heart tells me. Damn! Even the possibility of my uncle needing me is more important than this idiot. There's no need to think about it twice. Just leave him. You can come with me, and we'll talk about what'll happen later. Sergei seems to hesitate for a moment, but in the end he hits the henchman with the butt of the gun, knocking him out before following me outside. Outside the laboratory, the base is in total chaos. The henchmen are running back and forth, some of them carrying stacks of paper with them, while others are trying to move pieces of equipment. They ignore me as I try to get their attention until I physically stop one of the technicians by putting my hand on his chest. When and where was the last time you saw my uncle? At his office, sir. 2 minutes ago. He was with Mantis. When we get to the office, the first thing I see is Mantis leaning over the computer, typing desperately while my uncle goes through the drawers at the same time. I can't help letting out a sigh of relief, just loud enough to get their attention. Mantis looks up for a second before going back to work, but my uncle stops whatever he's doing and runs to meet me. At first I think he's going to hug me, but then he puts his hand on my shoulder and begins to angrily shake me back and forth. Of all the irresponsible things you've done, this is by far the worst. How did you even manage to activate the alarm? I didn't. Then who did? Because as far as I know, nobody else would dare touch it. My uncle stops shaking me, then takes a step back. It looks like he's finally about to lose his patience and hit me. But before he can do that, Mantis claps her hands together to get our attention. When we turn around, I see that she's waving a diskette in her hand. Boys, please, you can fight all you want when we aren't about to blow up. It's ready, Sphinx. He nods, picking up a paper from the desk. Before turning around and leaving, he makes sure to glare at me one last time, though. As we head out, Mantis grabs me by the arm, pulling me closer so that we're walking side by side. It takes a conscious effort to be able to keep up with her since she's taller, but the position at least means that she can lean down and whisper in my ear. Sergei, who had been standing outside by the door, waits a moment before beginning to walk, and then remains a cautious distance of a couple of steps behind us. That's the Russian, isn't it? If you told me that he looked like that, I'd have suggested that you keep him. Mantis, it's not like that. Are you sure? Because if you don't want him, I might just keep him for myself. She laughs like we weren't all still in mortal danger, changing her hands from my arm to around my shoulder. It takes us about a month to get to the lair back into something resembling a working space, and I'm not entirely sure we succeeded. The mercenary damaged a lot of sensitive equipment with the stunt he pulled, and though buying replacements is easy enough, it still takes a lot of hands to set it up. I don't have the nerve to tell my uncle that I'm planning to move out once I sell the diamond, which Sergei conveniently still had and which he agreed to hand to me in exchange for employment. My uncle has been pretty understanding, all things considered, so I don't want to push my luck by upsetting him. If I finish filling the box with the parts that need to be thrown away, and I pick it up. Sergei was supposed to be here hours ago. Sergei, come over here. We need to finish moving these. There's no answer. I don't keep an eye on him constantly based on the fact that he's more competent than half the henchmen put together, but that doesn't mean I can have him running around unsupervised. Sergei? I put down the box and back down, and I put the box back down and head outside. My uncle is standing at the other end of the hall, ordering a henchman on the ladder while he installs and tests the new security cameras. Uncle, have you seen the Russian? He says something to the henchman before walking over to me. Not since yesterday. I thought he was busy with you. Have you checked the laboratory? No, but he doesn't have any reason to be there. The laboratory was the first thing we took care of, remember? That doesn't mean he won't be there. Mistakes begin with oversights. Let's go. I was headed there anyway. We both head to the laboratory, but when we get there, Sergei is nowhere to be found. In fact, none of the people supposed to be here are. Yet the only thing that seems out of place is the severed arm on top of the table. Holy shit. There's an arm on the table! My uncle pushes me back immediately, stepping in front of me as he takes a quick look around to make sure that we're actually alone. The room is completely silent except for the sound of the clock ticking. Wait here. If anything happens, go call Mantis. He takes out of a pin of his pocket and approaches the table carefully but surely. Once he's close enough, he begins to prod the arm with the blunt end of a pin, first moving it slightly to the side and then turning it over completely. The arm makes a metallic, rather displeasing sound, and a thick blue liquid begins to leak from the inside of it onto the table. Whatever it is, there's a good amount of it. It doesn't stop until there's a puddle under the arm, and by then some has gotten onto the floor, too. My uncle puts down the pen before cleaning his hands with the end of his shirt. You can come closer now. The arm is a prosthesis, and this is just tinted hydraulic fluid. I go stand next to him, and as I see what he means almost right away. While on the outside it looks like any other arm, rather than exposed flesh and bone, the severed end has metal parts and cables of varying lengths sticking out of it. And just like that, the arm goes from horrifying to fascinating. What's that? Under all the mess, I notice a piece of paper slightly sticking out from under the arm. I pick it up and pick up the pen that my uncle was using and finish getting the arm out of the way. The paper is stained and it threatens to tear if I so much as touch it, but the writing is legible enough for me to be able to read it with some effort. When I begin, I feel my knees go weak from the shock. I briefly consider getting rid of it, but since I drew my uncle's attention to its presence, it's already too late. The paper is a note from Sergei. Apologies for leaving so abruptly. Blah, blah. I'm not returning to the Soviet Union. Blah, blah. Rest assured I won't say anything. Blah, blah. That son of a bitch left. This is his arm! Sergei somehow having a fake arm and having ripped it off of himself barely seems to register in my brain. I'm more preoccupied with the fact that since I was the one who convinced my uncle to let Sergei stay, this is yet another one of my mistakes. I don't even need to look at him to be able to tell that he's frowning. I take a step back while I try to think of something to say to calm him down. Wait, let's take another look at the arm. Even if he left it behind because there's something wrong with it, it's still an impressive piece of equipment. When was the last time that you saw such an intricate prosthesis? Imagine all the things that we could do with it. Just the arm itself is proof that the Soviets have been working on it as well. That seems to do it. My uncle raises an eyebrow as he considers what I just said, and while he still looks rather upset, now he looks more intrigued. Go get something to clean this up while I prepare the laboratory. He doesn't need to tell me twice. As soon as he's finished speaking, I turn around and leave. It's a shame that things with Sergei didn't work out as intended, but I can't help but be a little impressed by a man who is willing to rip his own arm off and leave it behind. Who knows? Maybe we'll meet again sometime. The end.
Thank you for joining me as I played Blind Men by Maneater Games. This was adorable. I love the overprotective supervillain uncle and just the utter shenanigans that are happening in this. I love that this is supposed to be set during the Cold War as well, which makes this hilarious to me for some reason. But overall, there was little I didn't like. I, of course, didn't like the American agent. for obvious reasons that only have a little bit to do with his nationality. I really want to know when we learned that Sergei had a name, because I truly think I missed that part. But other than that, and a few typos and the number it did on my throat reading in multiple deep voices for so long, this visual novel is an A+ in my book. 5 stars. Thank you everyone for watching Devallington Plays Blind Men by Maneater Games. If you enjoyed what you saw, please leave a like and follow and ring that notification bell so you'll know when the new episode drops. Please refrain from any hate toward me or the game developers. This review is just my opinion, and the devs worked really hard to make this game happen, and they deserve our support, because anyone who just wants to make their supervillain uncle proud of them deserves all the support. That's all for now, folks, and I'll see you next time.